We'll probably have one more talk 2 weeks from tonight. So I'm missing one set of notes, and if I should find it or I'm able to regenerate it before then, there might be one more after that. Either that I'll do it next fall. Next fall we'll begin on the next major section, which is on cosmology and all kinds of formulae for simple everyday living. Organic gardening using principles of cosmology. Okay, tonight we're going to do something a little bit patchy. It's not something that can be done thoroughly if we were to talk for once a week for the next 5 years to begin to talk about all the principles that run through past lives. I just want to talk about a few major of them so that there is a key to understanding how some of the ideas work, and so we can start applying them for our own future lives and just seeing how destiny works. This is not really very organized and it's not very sequential. I just threw the notes together in a hurry a few years ago and they have remained just thrown together. That's all the way it is. Alright, first I should make some clarifiers. One, I am not a clairvoyant, at least not at this point. I keep figuring any day now it's bound to happen. But I'm certainly not a trained clairvoyant. So everything that we have here is second-hand information, and it comes from the findings of other clairvoyants. However, I've been selective in my choice of sources. The people that I have chosen, for example, I have some of the ancillary materials on past lives that have to do with the book called The Lives of Alcyone. They're by C.W. Ledbetter and Annie Besant. And they were trying to prove in their time that Krishnamurti was the new Christ, and Alcyone was their name for Krishnamurti. And for a long time they sat down after supper and went into past lives and followed the past lives of Krishnamurti and wrote this book, a big thick book. It's printed in beautiful paper, except the problem is that paper that they printed it on began to crumble, and editions are very, very rare. I have a friend who got one. The process of talking about Krishnamurti, it becomes, in his past lives, or Alcyone's past lives, it becomes philosophical who's who, like all of the notable members of the Theosophical Society, who they were in past lives, and even brings in people like Jesus and Buddha and such like that. But they're not really reliable. I am going to quote some of Annie Besant on some of her notions of her past lives, but not on her principles, because her own past lives belie her principles of past lives. So I'm pretty careful. Most of these are taken from people like Heindel and Steiner, and a few people who I respect for having control of their clairvoyance and aren't phenomenalistic about it. I don't agree with the process of regressions because those processes are very sketchy. I'll try to give you an example. In the spiritual worlds, the psychological things run together with the factual soul and spiritual information in such a way that it's hard to separate. But I had a lady friend once. I had a little book myself the Rajput prince. Temperament like a Rajput prince. Now, it's a characteristic of northern Indian society in general. Mother actually feeds them, puts the food in their mouth with her hand. There is a lot of, they just spoil. When that takes place is lost all sound. Up all the way. Are we out of batteries? Yeah. Should I switch over to my other microphone and leave you high and dry? You have a picture with picture's worth 1,000 words. Stop. All right. Do you think that way I won't be drawing? Does that draw away from this?
No.
Oh.
You're recording.
At least. What will you do then?
Well,
You can make a copy of your tape and try and sing it.
hey! It's just going in and out.
Would you do that in the bathtub? She never stopped.
It results in a personality that has intense, fierce pride. Pride is never dead. And the personality collapses easily. Can't hold up under a lot of psychological stress. Now, what I'm saying about that is this is a characteristic of character, that a spoiled male incarnation can sometimes develop like a Rajput prince. But it maybe reached its height among the Rajputs. Now, with that notion, where it had reached its archetypal highest in that society, it might still, in the inner consciousness, be just like the nickname I gave it. It might still be there as the Rajput prince. And so somebody could say, well, in my past life, I was a male Rajput prince. And you could pick that up if you're sort of dreamily out of the body and not in control, and you can come to that kind of conclusion. There's a lot of suggestibility and there's a lot of psychological overlapping in the inner world that is exceedingly dangerous to make assertions. It takes a very clear, controlled clairvoyance that is well trained to be able to read into past lives. But the most important thing is, what we're going to talk about with past lives of mostly famous people, is the principles. If we understand those principles, then we understand how character develops, how it grows. The whole idea to remember, as we talked about with justice, in past talk about the law of consequence, this is a natural extension of it, because we don't just oscillate. If there was just the law of consequence without the principle of rebirth, we would oscillate. We would just sit in one place and we would bounce back and forth. There would be no progress. If there is progress, and you have to have retribution for your deeds, if you have to have exact feedback, that means then that and the progress has to be cyclical. And so the cyclicity means that things do come back, and that they come back in such a way that there is progress. So there is no metaphysical kind of logic that one can use where you have the conception of justice and divine retribution and the conception of progress and a balanced circle or balanced cycle of things without entering any kind of spiral development. It's a logical necessity. Because one believes in past lives and future lives, it doesn't mean that we can lay back now, and it doesn't mean that we can play for our next life, because if we try to do that after a certain point, then it becomes selfish. And it doesn't deter one bit from any form of, I have found nothing about the conception of rebirth will be continuously improved until the point where we are capable of experiencing Christ consciousness and moving the whole thing up a level higher. I find nothing that is contradictory with anything in Christianity. Anyone has concerns about that? Okay, let's just take a few simple ideas. Let's take the one from Annie Besant. In one life, Aisha, 374, 15. That it was, she lived almost 300, that's correct. She was until the First World War, she was associated with Gandhi. All right. I'll just give you a little bit of the lives and then try to give you some of the principles. Hypatia was a Neoplatonist, a woman that lived in Alexandria, Egypt, and was a mathematician and a mathematical philosopher as the Neoplatonists were. She was very, very highly regarded by the people because she was eloquent and she stood for the principles of Neoplatonism, which were very, very high-class principles. However, the Archbishop of Alexandria, he was Archbishop Cyril, was both jealous of her and lustful of her, and at this time in the church they didn't have to marry. They didn't have to be so also desirous to convert her to Christianity. He was very open-minded. The Orthodox Christians, not the Coptic Christians, the Orthodox Christians that came all of Egypt were famed for their not being very open-minded. So he sent various emissaries to her, trying to convert her and suit his suit with her, and she would have no part of him in any which way. Eventually, he had her killed for being taken against Christ. The way he had her killed was not the most pleasant. Very interested. He had, while her flesh was still alive, she would off the body, cut off the body, clamshells. Memory serves me right on the matter. Not a very pleasant kind of experience at all. Giordano Bruno was a sort of Renaissance man with a lot of curious scientific ideas that were not very much accepted by the church. He was sort of a traveling teacher. He went around expanding these ideas. If I'm not mistaken, one of the ideas that was expounded was the idea of a heliocentric universe. And not being pretty much of an individual and not aligned with an organization, because there were organizations that were basically theosophical in nature at that time, he was an easy mark. He used him to set an example, so to speak. And he was burned at the stake for heresy. You can see this individuality doesn't have a very good destiny with Christianity, other forms of Christianity that have been so far. Annie Besant was a brilliant, dynamic woman. She was a Fabian socialist. She was a mistress to an equally brilliant man, George Bernard Shaw. And she was in favor of all forms of liberal progress. She was very instrumental. She was Indophile. She spent a lot of her life in India. She was sort of first lieutenant to Madame Blavatsky, and was considered by Blavatsky herself as a more brilliant woman than Blavatsky. She unfolded a form of clairvoyance which she intentionally shut off because it was too overwhelming for her character. She was decidedly non-Christian, not necessarily anti-Christian. I don't know what to say anything more. Very much of a free thinker, a very strong, powerful, dynamic person. Now let's talk about some of the principles. I mentioned a quote from Paul Steiner talking about theosophical society. Steiner's statement about theosophical society is that it is for people who have reached a level of spiritual ripeness so that they can begin to unfold spiritual abilities again. People that have been associated with the mysteries in the past can reach the ripeness. But those same people are also not ready for the Christ mystery. Annie Besant is a perfect example of that. All of the Neoplatonists, we'll look at some of the past lives, all of the Neoplatonists stayed with it. And when they stayed with it, it kept them close from being able to do something more futuristic, from being able to see something new. This is obviously a life. Now, in stating this, I'm not trying by any means to justify the Archbishop of Alexandria. I'm not trying to justify the Catholic Church, saying that what either of them did was right, because obviously it wasn't. It was not a right and proper thing to do about murdering people like that. Certainly not a Christian deed anyway. There's a peculiar thing in Christianity. Christianity is a religion of freedom. And a lot of freedom comes about by being released from our body blood. That we have less attachment to the physical world. When we die in such a way that the etheric body can lose itself directly from the blood rather than just sort of passing out slowly. When that happens, you maintain all of your ties to the earth. Christianity has also been a religion that blood has been very important in, because this is the way Christ, the cosmic being that inhabited the body of Jesus, was freed from connection to the physical world, was through the letting of the blood. But there's another part of it, and that is in the murder of Christ Jesus, that was an accepting of the cosmic Christ as one of us. In order for us to be redeemed and saved by the cosmic Christ, the body of Jesus, we had to accept that being as one of us, one of it became. And that was done by what do we do with each other? We kill each other. And that action, we deem that person worthy of, like if that being had never been murdered or had, were to just die, ignored, and not really accepted as one of us and treated always as a strange outsider, that being never could come fully into contact with us. I think one of the principles involved here is that this entity that took these three bodies was deeply attached to all of mystery wisdom, and as profound and as august as it was not a new thing. Now, I think that in dying these kinds of lives, a number of things happened. One, a lot of past destiny was liquidated. A lot of past pains caused to other people. That was there. And it was sort of an inauguration into Christianity from an extreme divergence, almost you might say shell-the-in pathway that is separate to. Okay, that's one principle, but that's not the main principle that I want to talk about. I think that the quality here, like these two lives especially, the lives in which the person was executed, were lives where brilliance, moral and mental brilliance, were meant to stand out, and there was a kind of independence. And again, this meant for more of an acceptance, more of a coming into and being accepted by people. But the main thing that I'm trying to talk about in this whole principle, because I chose this life in this individuality especially, because Annie Besant said, you were born 7 times as a male and 7 times as a female. Obviously, she was an exception to her own rule. Seven times born as a female, 7 times as a male. That was her doctrine. But it turns out to be not true. Many people looking at many past lives find out that this is really much more the case. Female, male, and will alternate in bodies. Now there's a reason for it. That is the outlook is very different in the female body than in the male body. Eventually, as we develop our inner constitution stronger, there will be less and less difference, especially when we start forming bodies by others in the sexual process. And the polarity of the female vital body doesn't have to be focused for the development and building of bodies again. But the experience is different right now because of polarities. Right now we're at the deepest of material existence. And when you're at the deepest end of materiality, the differences stand out as the important things. Whereas the more we go into the spiritual world, the unity becomes more important. And the difference is then we have extremely different viewpoints between males and females. And on the average, 2,100 years it takes for the equinox to precess through one constellation in the sidereal zodiac. It is, for the whole cycle, it is 25,868 years roughly. To go through a whole processional cycle. Now, if you remember, the zodiac, the signs alternate: positive, negative, positive, negative. Now, on the average, if we look here, this is approximately 1,000 years these two lines. Here there is a significant jump. This one is only 300 years. And this is standard, according to reasonable clairvoyance and those that look like reasonable authorities, having studied quite a bit of literature of this type. 1,000 years is on the average how long it takes to come back, to birth again. Now, if you look at that, that is half the time, approximately, that it takes to process through one constellation of the zodiac. And that means during the time that we're in the age of Aquarius or in the age of Pisces or in the age of Aries, we will be born once as a male and once as a female. And then we will experience each of the stellar backgrounds from both points of view, and that will lead to a generally balanced type of character in terms of an inner balance and an outer balance. The reason, usually, I think we mentioned it before, why it takes 1,000 years to come back, is because thought processes are slow. Are slow thinkers, especially with no physical body to help slow down. They're being curious and going. Feedback. Oh, okay. And it takes a long time, even after we have created the thought of new life, it takes a long time for those thoughts to crystallize. Now, it's even reasonable to see why there is a shorter period here, because in the process, several lives as a spiritual thinker, greater facility was developed as as spiritual thinkers, so that it was possible to think about a new body much more quickly. Right, we're going to go into a little bit more of that later on. All right, so the principle that we're trying to work on here is polarities. That destiny and the way the cosmos works will not allow us to become too unbalanced. That one pole must always be balanced by the opposite pole, and if we were to become too unbalanced, it would result in a kind of character that would go off keel really easily. Now, this is a kind of polarization that is somatic. It deals with the polarity of the bodies, with the physical body or the etheric body. The higher body, the desire body, the mind, and such like that, there is no sexual differentiation. It's much more sexual. So only what we live in an external world where separation is the order of the day, that it takes place. Okay. No, not that. It's very difficult if we're functioning in our astral bodies. Like right now, we seem like two separate people, but in our astral bodies, we would have to be very conscious, make a discrimination as to what were your desires and what were my desires. Because we do influence each other, as we were talking about earlier. It's just the way that musicians influence each other. And all of the influences, you can see the influences in someone's music, but they aren't only the product of influences, they have their own creativity. Like for example, jazz guitarist Barney Koepsel grew up near the railroads and heard all vocals playing harmonicas on passing trains. You can hear jazz guitars and he's improvising later on. All of those vocals, harmonica music lived in his jazz. It's part of his experience. You know, like some people are influenced by Chopin and Bach and people like that. His influence was yes.
No matter whether it's
the desire body is male. It is male and female.
So there's no one polarity.
That's correct. Right. Another set of documents in most cases last one. There we go. Oh boy. These supposedly are the same individuality. Plato we all know about. He was one of the wealthy aristocratic students of Socrates. One who supposedly recorded many remarkable dialogues with Socrates and faithfully wrote them out, doctored them up quite a bit, especially one of them that had to do with politics. He was a right-winger. He was a Ronald Reagan type variant and loved the Spartans more than Athens. Athens was one of the greatest cultural centers the world will have ever known. Here, I've looked up some about his life. It was a 10th century. This here is about. a nun who wrote a number of dramas, moralist, bookish types of dramas. And this was Plato epitomized, this was in the heart of the age of Aries that Plato was born as Plato. Plato was involved with Masonry, Egyptian variety, went through the Eleusinian mysteries, went through Egyptian mysteries, and was indeed spiritually awakened. But the Aries age, Aries is probably the most macho of the signs of the zodiac, and of all of the cultures and societies that the world has known, the pride of the Greeks was extremely macho. They didn't even respect the women in the least, as consequently they called them alcoholics. But here we have a masculine temperament. There are children of fire and children of water. The sons of Cain and the sons of Seth. The children of fire, the Canaanites, are people who approach the spiritual life by knowledge, by works, by deeds, by doubt. The children of water, the Catholics, the Sethites, as opposed to the Freemasons who are the children of fire, approach the spiritual life by love and devotion, by the acceptance of authority, by humility, and such like that. Now we're talking about a different type of polarity, that even though we're polarized between males and females from body to body, or incarnation, spiritually we have a bent of either being fiery and Freemasonic or watery and Catholic, that is Canaanite or Sethite. Plato reached his initiatory awakening in a very masculine path, in a very masculine time. He was right in sync with all of the times. However, when it became the watery age of Pisces, he found himself in a feminine body. He was a tremendous misfit. The history of this life was most unhappy. That the whole concept of devotion and the Christian concept of humility went very, very hard with Plato in his body, because he was, can you imagine coming from the glories of something like being the founder of Platonism and being right at the key of things, to do something that is out of temperament. But there was a struggle to try and do it. And the result was Karl Julius Schreyer, in the next life, a German romantic poet that had the Greek ideal, as many of those folks did. Everyone from Wagner to Isidore Duncan, she got over to Europe, she took on the Greek ideal of the perfect body and the perfect Greek education and everything like that. But yet at the same time, he was charged with the thick German emotional romanticism. And it's trying to fuse together ideas which we might call the fusion of fire and water. It wasn't completely successful in the life of Schreyer. So those are the principles that are involved. It's involved being stuck in one pole and learning to be adjustable in another pole. So what I'm trying to say that there is a psychological polarity that goes along with a physical polarity, and both have to be balance at all times. That for Freemasons to not practice devotion is as wrong as for Catholics to not practice self. And there must always be a continued balance. Is one of the chief laws of spiritual development. You can't do anything for baseball to remain psychologically healthy without maintaining balance. And especially in regard to polarities, male and female, spiritually male and female, fiery and watery, because where the balance is a matter of between two things, it's much more likely to lead to extremes, silhouette differences. Now I want to talk about a few exceptions. These are supposedly all the same individual. Doesn't leave much room for you and I to do anything in the world, does it? Yes. All of the famous people have usually been famous people, which makes it, when we think now, all the millions and millions of people that are born, how few of them rise to any great level of prominence or greatness or great talent or something like that. But then if you have to think back that even as few as they are, they're fewer yet because they're probably the same folks being reborn, doesn't leave much room. But there is a saving grace in that. Eventually, the being becomes very, very spiritual and moves up to a higher level and can no longer do the direct kinds of activities as we do in the physical world now. Nearly other people take over those responsibility, which is why Masons are so big on the principle of democracy as opposed to aristocracy. Because in aristocracy, you could have the right people being all prominent positions all the time. Probably things would go smoother, but it wouldn't allow a lot of opportunities for education for everyone. And if in a democracy, uneducated people think have responsibility, they're likely to make a lot of stupid mistakes. And if they do, they learn from them. At least they have had the responsibility, they've had the opportunity to grow through that. The point I'm trying to make here, this is a male, a male, a male, a male, a male. 5 lives in succession as a male. However, none of these are what you would call small-time lives. John the Baptist was born because a whole nation of people trusted him, so much so that the priests that wanted to destroy Jesus would not, couldn't really go and do it because all of the populace trusted John the Baptist so much. And John the Baptist had said that this is the one whose bootstrap I'm not worthy of latching. And they were afraid that because of the baptism by John, that they would be very much riled up. When an individual becomes very, very developed, so that individual no longer is just a personality, has a consciousness that extends, is capable of influencing many people, what happens then is that the etheric body, by the deeds of service, becomes polarized positive no matter what kind of body the physical body is. That is to say, we said that women have a stronger vital body, etheric body, and if they didn't have that stronger vital body, they couldn't bring children into the world. There's a tremendous amount of energy. There's a great sacrifice that goes out. It's more than just losing the calcium and then losing your teeth later on. It's more than having your muscles go flaccid and having your endorphins go out of balance. It's much more than that. You're actually giving life to this body. After a number of lives, the etheric body gets charged so positively that even in the male's body, it's going to be positively charged. We're talking about people here that are great, great spiritual beings. When Raphael died, when he was ill, hope came and waited on him like he had, like a nurse's aide. He waited on him and said about the same thing that John the Baptist said about Christ Jesus. I'm not worthy of latching his bootstraps. This is a being that is positive in the vital body. Then if a special work must be done in the physical world, why not take a male's body? Not because the male's body is any better than the female's body, but because in the physical plane, the male's body is polarized male. And so all of these individuals, this is the same individual being born and has all of these different personalities, has such a strong inner vital body that even though the physical body was polarized positively, the vital body was also positively polarized. So it was in effect a very strong, positive, woman's-like vital body in a physical body. And so it was like a double positive. Very often, in very highly evolved beings, they choose the male's body so that they can have both the etheric body and the physical body polarized positively. Okay. Same thing is true of Zarathustra and Solomon and Jesus. Another example of the same thing, all the same individual. So the whole idea of polarities. All right, now I'm going to talk about yes. I don't know that there has been an incarnation since then. I don't know at all. I don't know that he maintains a physical body, period. I can't answer that. I don't know that. If he maintains a physical body. I want to talk about relations. I'll just give you an example from my own life experience that has come up, I think, about 4 times in my life that I've run into instances like this. The first instance was with my friend Hazel and her daughter Erica. Hazel was a very brilliant woman, and at one time been a friend of Einstein's. She was a painter. She had no legs, you know. She was married to another painter who was quite famous at this time. He was a really abstract painter. And friends used to gather around their house. They had an unusual relationship, kind of destiny anyway. There are some of those things that you can try and formally break a relationship, but if you've got the destiny to be with the person, you've got to be with them anyway. They divorced each other, and it turned out that they still lived in the same house. And no matter how hard they tried to get away, they couldn't get away from each other because they still had to interact with each other. They had a daughter named Erica. And a lot of the conversations, since several of us are deeply interested in spiritual philosophy and rebirth and such like that, a lot of the conversations centered on the subject, and she was always interested in the subject. She was always positive about it. Never someone, you could get something. See it, accept your point of view is true. But no matter what we did, we couldn't get it to accept. She's a very stubborn woman. And we used to meet on the weekends because people had to work or school and things like that. And one weekend we came there, and suddenly she was more open to the idea of rebirth. What had happened is that in the course of the week, she was admonishing Erica to do something. Erica was about 9 or 10 years old. And she pushed her and pushed her and pushed her. And all at once Erica just turned around and said, when I was your mother, I didn't make you do that. And then both of them realized what she had said. There was just a moment where they just stopped, stared at each other. And you could say, well, maybe kids always say that. Maybe we were playing make-believe with the dollies or something like that. But it was such a remarkable thing, and it had that experience of truth that was such that it stayed. You know, it changed their outlook on life. And I've had about 4 instances like this where parents have come up with the same thing, saying, well, when I was your parent, I did it this way, or when I was your parent, we did this together. And because it is done with that spirit of truth that's so innocent and untainted that children have, it sticks. And it's always a big changer in life. The principle that I'm trying to get at here is that we've been talking about, presently we've been talking about horizontal polarities, male and female. Now we're looking at vertical relationships. That is directive parent and receptive child. It turns out that very often we develop, when we have power over other people, we develop a destiny with them. And we have to know how it feels to act in a certain way. Or we have a certain responsibility to giving a body, to giving a form to other people. And so it often happens, now this one can't work the same way as with the horizontal destinies. You could be married to the same person every life. Very frequently that is the case. That both people change sexes and they take turns who is the husband and who is the wife. But you can't do that in the vertical relationships because you have to turn all of history inside out, upside down. Because what would your, like if your children have to be your parents and you have to be parents to your parents would have to be parents, that means your children would have to be great-grandparents to your grandparents, and by the time it doesn't quite work totally that way. So the vertical relationships are different than horizontal relationships, but pretty much the idea, because more than even in work or anything else, the one opportunity that everyone gets to be in charge and to have that vertical superiority is in families. Now there are often polarity reversals again. Let's take a number of people who just held close relationships, people who held close relationships to each other over several lives. I hope you all are. The middle incarnations, these people are all the way through these dualities. Cornelius Tacitus was the Roman historian that wrote the Britannicus, the Annals, and what's the other one? History of the Republic or something like that. Matilda was a noblewoman in the days of feudalism. We all know who Walter Emerson was. Pliny the Younger was the grandson or the nephew of Pliny the Elder. He's a lesser historian, whereas Pliny the Elder was a greater historian. Countess Beatrice was a friend of Matilda, also in the French times of feudalism. And Hermann Grimm was a nephew of the nephew or son of one of the brothers Grimm, who did the Grimm Brothers fairy tales. The relationship here, they were always close. Cornelius Tacitus and Pliny the Younger were both close friends. Here, both of these people recorded history secondhand. Both of these people watched history directly through their husbands and the powers of their husbands. They watched history, and their outlook on the intrigues of history was more direct than the second-hand relationship of Tacitus and Pliny. And in this case, both of them wrote history or made history by the strength of their own character. It's really quite interesting how the flavor of a character stays through life to life to life. Cornelius Tacitus wrote, "It is the purpose of the historian is to write the deeds of men so that their good characters will shine and the scoundrels can be shown for what they were." Ralph Waldo Emerson said something similar. If you read the tone of them, the tone sounds so similar. Ralph Waldo Emerson said the same thing only much more briefly. He said, "A sick man is a sinner found out." And so the flavor stays all the way through. The friendship stays all the way through. And even next one, like Hermann Grimm, even though he was born and raised in Europe, the first time he read anything by Emerson, he said, "This is the way I've thought all my life, and I've always wanted to write." He writes in his own biography that never before have I felt so much at home with any other author than with Emerson. And they became very close, strong, fast friends. So you can see that the bonds are there from life to life to life. And it also makes one wonder whether Pliny the Elder was an old Jacob Grimm. Because besides collecting the Grimm's fairy tales, Pliny the Elder wrote this tremendous book of natural history. In many volumes, we collected all of the folklore and everything of ancient Rome. Jacob Grimm did the same thing. I've got a 4-volume set of the history of Teutonic mythology. It's thick and heavy. You just wonder whether a character stays that thick and heavy for life after life after life like that and just grinds out that heavy sort of thing. Okay. I don't know what more to say. I'm just trying to say that relationships stay close from life to life to life, and some relations change from life to life, vertically. Horizontally, they remain very similar. Turnabout is not a vertical turnabout. All right, we've looked at enough of relationships and polarities and things like physical conditions. Let's take one of the Cornelius Tacitus's favorite subjects, Nero. I don't want to tell war stories, but if you read the section in Cornelius Tacitus about Nero and his coronation and everything, his proclamation of himself as a god, every kind of human depravity that you can think of, short of black magic, every perversion that you can think of is written in there. You know, for example, had this woman who was a very high-spirited woman that was his wife. She was several months pregnant. She came to him. She was really strong-spirited, and he kicked her in the stomach. Killed the child. Showing all the facts right here. Nero was the destroyer of Rome, wanted to rebuild the city, so he burned it down. And he didn't play fiddle, he played a harp. And he was a flagrant homosexual out of boredom. And he just was the ultimate destroyer. He carried it on in one or several lives afterwards. And then was born as Crown Prince Rudolph. Think of the Habsburgs or the Hohenzollern, one or the other, down in Austria. I believe my history is terrible. The character of the Crown Prince Rudolph, he was the young man that had so much promise, and everybody looked to. He became madly insane and committed suicide. Committed a personal suicide. There is a principle here that things work from without in and from within out. In the case of Nero and these other lives, the person was extremely outward, extremely sensualistic, and spent all of this energy in pouring outward into sexual excesses and everything else. Turned all of the spinal energy downward. As a consequence, this remains in the inner spiritual consciousness in such a way, even though that we don't have a physical body when we're in the spiritual world, but the whole conception of the polar spinal fire being downward and outward versus upward and inward is there in the consciousness. So eventually, the consciousness of the spirit who built this strongly sensualistic personality lost some control over the function of it in building lives, and it became such a matter that the mind became weak. So the general principle that I'm trying to get to is that if a person is exceptionally sensual is exceptionally sexual and puts all of their energies downward in sensual activities, this develops a trend in the flow of consciousness, and in building the future bodies, there will be a difficulty in building a healthy mind and a healthy brain. That's the basic principle that is involved here. Working the other way, if someone puts too much emphasis into the mind and brain development and neglects the outward development, the sensory physical development, the same thing can happen. You can have someone who is very strong spiritually or very strong mentally, but weak physically. And it works in such a way that a consciousness, inward consciousness, that is used to lying, it's like Mark Twain said, if you lie, you have to have a very good memory. You have to remember what lie you told to who. And if you get accustomed to that devious lying type of consciousness, you build a mind that's used to producing illusions, untruths. And just the opposite of the Crown Prince Rudolph happens. You produce a body that is subject to many, many, many faults. Many, because our bodies are built by our minds. And if a person's been lying all the time, they come to build the platform for the next physical body. It's got all kinds of faults in it, and then the person just gets one sickness after another, after another, after another, because they've been used to lying, and that's the kind of body they build. Then there are other things. If we take this conception of the lie, that's just the simplest case. Somebody being an extreme liar and carrying it out in the next life, having a very physically weak body. But sometimes we get an idea sets. We take on a whole philosophy. And that philosophy may not be true. It may be filled with lies. And so it works in such a way that in the first life, we can just accept this mentally. In our next life, we may accept it emotionally. And it begins to sink into us. In the third life, it becomes part of our actions. We not only think these thoughts and have these feelings by it, but we act on it. And eventually, it becomes part of our physical character. What our thoughts are in one life, unless we're completely in control of ourselves magically, that we can take our thoughts, especially new thoughts, and get the feel of them and act on them, it's very rare that something can change the physical stature within a given life. But granted, it takes you 4 lives. Now suppose some of those thoughts we had, and that resulted in deeds that were untrue deeds, or unkind deeds, or something like that when we were doing actions. Suppose you could say then that a life where a person has a number of illnesses tied together may very well be the flushing out. It might be like the cosmic flushing of the toilet of a conceptology that has been with that individual for 3 or 4 lives, where they've been taking it from the level of thought all the way down to the physical level, and when they suffer from it, it's like you can't believe that the physical world doesn't exist and take a stone and get away with it. You're going to stub your toe. It's going to be painful. You can't have wrong ideas about the world, and then when it actually becomes part of our physical body, you can't accept it that way. You have to accept it that way. On the other hand, the same thing is true, but in a very peculiar way. If we keep our physical body healthy, then our actions become more efficient. And if our actions become more efficient, then the impressions and our motivations become more true, and we eventually come to see the truth. What I'm saying is you can work from the other way up. By keeping the physical healthy, it can work its way back into spirit, in terms of spiritual consciousness. Especially what we perceive. There is a turnabout maxim that is very important. That is, if you want to know yourself, you look at the world. If you want to understand something in the world, you look in yourself. So in the same way that thoughts eventually become part of our physical existence, experiences in the physical world become part of our spiritual being. And what we're doing in this life in terms of seeing the world correctly is going to very much affect our spiritual perception of things in future lives. So in short, we have all of these different kinds of things going on. We have inner flows and outer flows all going at the same time. It's a very complex sort of thing. Now this is just a simple statement. You can't say that every person who has a lot of illnesses was a big liar. And that's one thing that we have to be very cautious about in looking at all of this stuff. And we can't run around saying, I know you did wrong. It's not an ethical thing at all. I want to talk a little bit about this polarity of the body. It turns out it's very often the classical case that is given, and it's given by Rudolf Steiner, that Byron is a perfect example of that he puts so much of his spiritual energy into his brilliance that when he built his archetype, the cycle was delineated in a polar fashion into clubfoot. And very often people who specialize brilliance in a polar vertical have retro feet. It's an interesting sidelight. Basically what I'm trying to say in all of this is that we're just talking about the simple cases. There are the way we relate to the whole cycle of life, the different ages and stages of life, and the different horizontal balances result in different types of physical conditions. That for every illness, there is an attitude. And there are attitude illnesses that become fads, like plagues and things like that, where everybody has a similar attitude. That was a fairly obvious one. It was a very unclean society. When all the plagues came through, people didn't care much about hygiene or things like that. It's only to be expected. Now, there's a special in this polarity. We've said that we have the sexual energy rising and falling and rising and falling. We said that in the Old Testament, the sin against the Holy Spirit was sexual abuse. That was so-called fall of humanity, was the abuse of sexuality. In the New Testament, it's very clear. It's in Matthew's Gospel that Christ Jesus says that sin against the Holy Ghost is not sexual abuse in the new sense. Lies. When we're talking about the special cases are sexual abuse and lies. There's a classic case for this. Nietzsche. Again, the life immediately previous, I believe he was a male, I'm not sure. But in the life immediately previous to being Nietzsche, he was a monk. A monk who did a lot of clear thinking and had a lot of regularity and good habits in his life. But he also had one bad habit. And this is one that people on the street would laugh at us for thinking this way, but he was an excessive masturbator. This is an example. His life as Nietzsche is a perfect example of someone who in a previous life was extremely abusive of the sexual energy, turning it down, so that when he was born as Friedrich Nietzsche, he ended up being a madman. He ended up being a madman with syphilitic monomania. And I guess it's even possible that he got a syphilitic monomania by being a passive homosexual. I'm not sure about that. It's conjectured by different folks in the regular historical community. But it's a case of the mind becoming weak because of the too much turning downward of the sexual energy. Same kind of idea as Nero, very extreme. In fact, some people, like Rudolf Steiner, for example, claims that Nietzsche was actually overshadowed by the Ahrimanic Antichrist in the latter part of his life. He was mad with power and megalomania. But on the other hand, Steiner personally knew Nietzsche and saw him on his deathbed. Nietzsche's sister wanted Steiner to carry out his final works in the final collection of the works of Nietzsche and Steiner. Politely interfered. But the thing was even though he was dying of syphilis, like things, the rhythmic system, the heart, the lungs, were very strong, very powerful. Here was a man who was insane, and very broken down from syphilis. Still the heart, the lungs, the rhythmic system, which was built by having good habits as a monk in the previous life, which is as strong as ever at the end of life. Okay. So much about physical conditions. Let's talk about character conditions. Stable development. Became Pope Gregory II. Was reborn later as Haeckel of the post-Darwinian evolutionary theories, who was an atheist. How would you ever expect the Pope to be reborn as an atheist? What it doesn't matter, what I'm trying to say in this, is political system doesn't matter in terms of rebirth. But the character of Pope Gregory II and of Haeckel had the same kind of staunch, never give quarter, never give up, that there is a constancy of character that no matter what side of an issue that you're born on, you will be faithful to it. And that stays. It takes many, many lives for somebody who is staunch to become very frail or to become very delicate, and vice versa. For somebody who is sensitive but weak to become very firm and hard, it takes a many lives for that to take place. Character is something that changes very, very slowly. And that's the principle that I'm trying to get across here. Let's go back to another view of Platonist. You show how sometimes philosophy doesn't change. The emperor Julius, sometimes called the apostate, was 2 lives later equal to Rocky. The Emperor Julian was a Neoplatonist. In fact, early in his career, wrote a treatise of why he wasn't a Christian. And because he knew the truth of the mysteries. And he knew about the inner spiritual worlds. Oh, he was He knew the truths about the spiritual world, he knew about the mysteries, but he didn't understand the total picture of it. But so he wrote this treatise on why the Christians were basically wrong. Then he had a conversion experience and became a Christian. But when he became a Christian, it was much different than when Augustine became a Christian. Augustine, pronounce it as you will. What happened with Augustine is that he was a follower of the Manichaeans. And when he became a Christian, he overthrew it all. He became a very narrow-minded Christian. But not the Emperor Julian. He could see how Christianity was a culmination of the mysteries, and how the mysteries could very well work into Christianity. And so, what he was going to do, he was on his way. He proclaimed to his Neoplatonistic friends that he was going to take the mysteries and incorporate them as part of the Imperial Christian Church. He was murdered. He was murdered because in those days, people of the mysteries, it was felt a betrayal to take the mysteries and make them public. You know, you still hear, even as late as the mid-19th century, Masons murdered people for divulging inside secrets. But there's a bigger reason, and that is that Christianity, the pure experience of Christ and of that light of forgiveness that transcends all mental activity, had to be experienced as in all of humanity in the acceptance, the blind faith acceptance of the early Christian church before the mysteries could come back in. It wasn't until the Renaissance that the mysteries could come back into Christianity. And because the world had to be prepared for the mysteries to come in. And so, like, the murder of, what I'm trying to say is that all of these things have meanings on higher levels. The murder of Julian was one thing between himself and the Neoplatonists for betraying the mysteries. But relative to the greater history of spiritual evolution through the Christian church, it meant another thing. It meant that the last person who could have brought the mysteries into the church, was stopped from doing that. So, whenever people, the fact that Roosevelt died at such and such time, and took over, meant something, it means something more on a much deeper level. However, this is a case of not only did the character of Emperor Julian be very temperamental and mystery-oriented carry over later on, a life or two later, into Tycho Brahe, but the same fixation was there. This is often what happens when a person dies in a murder. Because when a person dies in a murder, they just haven't died of old age. They still have things they want to do. And when that gets cut off, then that urgency is still there, and that's carried in, like for a suicide. In the next life, they're also fixated as Tycho Brahe was. Not only did the character carry over, but the same work carried over. As much as Tycho Brahe was an astronomer and collected all of these things, he had herbalism, and he had this gigantic angelology, which was just like the angelology, of the thrones and the dominions and all of those things. Only his were in he used most of the Kabbalistic terms, and he was trying to, through his astronomical work, be an influence, peddle those same ideas of the angelology and make it to the whole world to understand this. I don't know what you would call it. Theocracy? That's not the right word in the way the word is used. Okay, but you get the whole idea. There can be a fixation between life and life and the life. So we've seen here one case of a character remaining the same, but being on different side of the issue. Now we see the case of fixation, where there is a character that tries to carry out the same work after 1,000 years have taken place, still trying to carry out the same life as before. Now let's see somebody who is midway in between. The character remains the same, but tries to carry out the same work only without a fixation. And that is Socrates. Sophocles was the middle of the three great Greek playwrights. Aeschylus was the old reactionary and very strong about the ancient Greek religion. The radical was the youngest of the three, that was Euripides. But the most humanistic of them was Sophocles, who was also involved with the Eleusinian mysteries, as Plato was. And Sophocles wrote the Oedipus cycle. Oedipus Rex, which is hybrid of Greek and Latin. And then Oedipus had Colonus and Antigone. In all of his writings, he works on the human element as opposed to the spiritual element in Aeschylus, or the radical laid in the hands of the people on the street. Euripides got carried away, like, the Medea and all those violent kinds of things. But there's a peculiar thing. All of the Greek playwrights were Ionians. But the musicians were Gordians. And they didn't speak each other's language. There were Ionian forms of music, but there is an Ionian mode and a false Ionian mode, all those sorts of things. The Catholic Church inverted the Ionian and Dorian mode. I forget a little bit how that goes. So when they put on these great tragedies in the festivals in Athens and in places nearby, there had to be collaborations. And the collaborations, horrible fights, because the language of the Ionians, the choruses that they wanted to have, were much different in the music of the Dorians. They couldn't even talk to each other. They were like different tongues. And they fought and fought and fought. The ideas of presenting the mysteries involved with mystery and he had seership himself, but something else had changed. My guess is, I'm not a clairvoyant, but my guess is in his life here, Wagner was one of the pioneers of where the opera master, where the person who wrote the operas did both the lyrics and the music. And my bet is that in between here, you study music like a fiend. No more am I going to have to compromise. You know, like the Italian opera folks right now, they're still doing that. They're working Italian opera. The fights between the librettist and the composer, terrible fights. And in birds of the powerful cities of Greece. And so like those whole ideas were carried on that way. And so Wagner's music is not, it's not exceptionally complicated music. It's pretty much simple homophonic music. He has a few different notions of harmony and complex. And he himself said that the words were the things that were most important, especially when it came to Parsifal. The words were the most important. Oh, there are some in here I guess I don't want to go into. Huh? Well, I'll just show you something else. On the streets of Greece, in the 5th century BC, there was a young artist. This young artist was a friend of Plato's. And even though he was a Platonist, he listened to Plato and liked the ideas of Plato. And slowly allowed him to become, he didn't have the same problem that the Platonists did. There's the connection that we made before about Plato being reborn as a German romantic poet was quite common. There are a number of German romantic poets who were Platonists earlier. That they were again trying to take the transcendental philosophy and mix it with the juices that they got of the emotionality in the Pisces age, and they became romantic poets. But one of them that allowed it to develop very slowly was Goethe. He was just sort of a Greek artist who slowly matured the ideas of Plato, but brought them into the emotional side of his being much, much more harmony. Okay. I have a number of others here, but I'm just going to pass on because this is much too long. Let's just take some people who all fairly much knew each other. No, the wrong one. The other one is unknown to everyone else. The Arab that was Woodrow Wilson. It's only fair that since we talked about the sons of Plato, that we should talk a little about the sons of Aristotle. You might say the children, I should say sons, the children of Plato versus the children of Aristotle. We talked before about the polarities of bodies between male and female, and we talked about children of fire and children of water. There are also intellectual bents. Those people who tend to be more idealists that work from the ideas down to the physical world are called children of Plato. Whereas those who work more from perceptions and then back to the realm of ideas are called children of Aristotle. And periods in history alternate between Aristotelians and Platonists. The Aristotelians, as we all know, Aristotle's knowledge was taken by the Arabs because it fit very well into pedestrian Arab philosophy, and it could be centered by a teleological type of reasoning on everything coming straight from Allah. And so they carried out Aristotelians. And all of these folks who have introduced modern science to the world, Harun al-Rashid was the famous caliph of Baghdad. He was the one that started all of the study of alchemy and poetry and astronomy and astrology and studied everything in his court. That's where this is where our word wizard comes from. The Vizar is the Grand Vizier. The Vizar was the chief intellectual consultant, what would we call him? We call him science advisor to the president in our times. Only he was a man of magic. And Harun al-Rashid was someone who specialized over years or over incarnations in being the grand spirit, being the leader. He was not necessarily the scientist himself, but he had that spirit that he could bring those types of people around to him. And so in the same way, Francis Bacon in England carried that same sort of thing into our world. The empirical school of all modern science. Al-Mamun was the son of Harun al-Rashid, and his Vizar was a man who studied a lot of astronomy and was very, very detailed, carried on that work, was born as Laplace. Laplace is one that does all of Laplace. Invented the Laplace transform so that you can tell exactly on the surface of the Earth where the shadow of an eclipse is going to turn and come about. He was a brilliant mathematician. Jebel al-Tariq, meaning Jebel the Turk. This is the man who was a general, but was also a somewhat enlightened man, carried the Arabic enlightenment with him. This is the man that tried to force Arabic culture via the southern stream, that is from North Africa to Spain into Europe. This, we still have this name is now bastardized into Gibraltar. It is Jebel al-Tariq. And so this is again carrying out, you might say that there is a harmony between the Arabic consciousness and the inductiveness of the Arabic consciousness and the simple independent monotheism and the British mind. Because all of these people, with the exception of Laplace, were reborn as British or as stuffy Americans. At the same time, Jebel al-Tariq was trying to force Europe from the south, coming to the Turkish side. There's another man, I'll just mention his name, Muawisha. He was trying to force the Turkish, from the Turkish side rather than the Moorish side. He was trying to force Europe and bring Arabic culture to Europe in that way, and he became Woodrow Wilson. Again, the same idea of somebody highly educated, broadly educated, pedestrian, Aristotelian type of knowledge being brought into the world. All right, that's enough of that. We're talking about far past lives. I just want to talk about a few little topics. One, some ideas and the other some moral principles involved in this. The first is the standard pace for rebirth is between 750 and 1250 years. We'll talk about the reasons why. But not everybody goes at that pace. Sometimes there are very short periods. And the most common, when there are very short periods between rebirths, it is either the very highly evolved or the very lowly evolved that come back to birth immediately. You can come back or must come back immediately. Let's take the case of the lowly evolved first. The best example I can think of it is Northern Ireland. These people know each other, know the names of each other, know the habits of each other, and they hate each other. And they have this blood feud, this vengeance that goes on and on and on. And the desire to kill the enemy is such, it's so externalized, there's so much projection on the enemy's outside that there is no interning. The desires are so fixed on objects of hatred that they can't really turn inward. And what happens, they find with cases like this where there are blood feuds and where there are hatreds that are that intensely fixed that when a person would normally go to purgatory, they don't purge. They don't even notice the pain. The body is so hardened, the desire body is so hardened by hatred that they don't even notice any body tendencies. They don't even allow the desire body to run because they're still looking at what's going on there. So what happens is the agencies of destiny put together a makeshift life for them and bring them right back to the same conditions again. And they keep on fighting each other back and forth. And one person will come back to birth again and again and again, suffering all the pains and short life and everything else. You know, they're commandos by the time they're age 10 when they're Ireland already. And until they have suffered enough, and when they've suffered enough and lost somebody that they love, so that they no longer bear hatred, it's gone through them, then they go through the normal life cycle. So that's the instantaneous. For the positive people who are born, if a person is an initiate, another name for an initiate is Maj. And that means someone who is capable of manipulating the forces of nature in what would be called a miraculous way or a magical way. There is great need in the world. One need only go to a city like Chicago and see millions of people who probably don't think of God maybe but once a year or something like that. And the only time you use the word God is when you're cursing. I have not seen about Chicago. It's that way in almost every city. To think of the millions and millions of people that need some kind of influence for positive enlightenment. If a person is an initiate, which means they're capable of taking the spiritual ideas and magically making them manifest as magical phenomena, that means they have the capability of building an archetype for a new life almost immediately. And so such people come back, they skip a lot of the third heaven experience intentionally, because they draw their experiences in their inspirations anyway, in their devotional life, in their spiritual work, and they come back to work almost immediately because there is that great of a need for people that have that kind of experience. Now, then there is sort of a moderately short 200 to 500 year class. And that constitutes people like Annie Besant. That is somebody who is beginning through spiritual exercises to be able to work with the inner forces of nature. They're not masters yet so that they're a magician or an initiate, but that they're capable of doing things on a much quicker basis. Probably everybody in this room probably comes in that 200 to 500 year category, that depending on how well you think that you're going to come back that much more quickly because there's that much more to do and because there's that much more experience to garner. And then there are very long, as long as 10,000 years between incarnations. Again, it is the very, very evil and very, very good that do that. Let's take the evil case. Suppose that someone has been an arch sorcerer since the time of Atlantis. They have powers that they can really mucky things up. Sometimes the agencies of destiny hold those people, even though they need the experience of rebirth, hold those people back from being reborn because they could cause too much damage to something because of the evolutionary cycles. You cause too much damage in the world to bring those people back in the normal 1,000 years. The example that I find that is the perfect example is if you plant lawn seed. Eventually that lawn will take sunlight and make fresh air out of it through the photosynthesis process. But when the first tender shoots come out, they can't take that from sunlight. They need moisture. So you put a thin sprinkling of straw or hay or something like that on to protect the young shoots until they are strong enough to stand on their own. When there is a new work being done, such as the rise of early Christianity, or after there's been a great devastation, you have the new creative work is so frail and it's so tenuous in its development, then the agencies of destiny keep the people that would intentionally break it up and do it harm. They keep them out of incarnation for a long time until that society is very strong. When that society is very strong and is already going into decadence, then they let the evildoers in, and that's when all the decadence runs wild. Our time seems to be near the end of the Pisces age and on the downswing of the United States society, and we can expect a lot of decadence. We can expect a lot of evildoers to be allowed in. On the other hand, very, very powerful spiritual people, sometimes they've already got so much experience that they don't need to manifest in the physical world. What they do is work instead on the level of ideas or in the deeper spiritual worlds, and they prepare conditions there and become specialists in inner work. And when they do come back, the conditions have to be just right. And it's very rare that there are the right kind of conditions some of the cycles are 10,000 years long, before they're entered in 12, 14,000 years, before the conditions are right for them to come back into that special work. You need to have special kinds of cycles and special kinds of materials for them to build the bodies that they need. So then we have a little bit more of an idea about rebirth. Population trends. Obviously, in times when a lot of people have been held out because we negate things too much, when you start letting those beings in, it's going to mean that there's going to be higher population trends. I think the 1/10 of the human life wave generally manifests in the Earth. You're being born again and again. I think the numbers run between 5 and I think closer to 8 billion are the ones that are associated with the Earth again and again and again. There are times when many leave Earth incarnation, and there are times when many are brought in that are rarely here, but those are things that are just so far-fetched that it's out of our experience to talk about them. In general, we are near a population high now on the physical Earth, because there have to be so many working from the inner side as nature forces that there is like a mathematical proportion to how many of the normal incarnators can be here. Awfully long and drawn out. The thing that I'm trying to say here morally that I think is the most important is we cannot cling to the form. You cannot be Ticos and try to do the same thing over for several rebirths. We cannot cling, if we want to know about the principle of rebirth, we cannot cling to sexism. Because one will surely going to be born in the opposite sex in the next body. In fact, I even think that I have a friend that thinks that militant feminists were people who were machos in the last life and are dabbling in the same way that Haeckel and Gregory II were on both sides of the issue that sexists do that. But you cannot be a sexist, you cannot be a racist, you can't cling to any race because that's, again, a limited expression. And you can't be a culturist. You can't cling to Greek culture. Because if you were to be born as a Greek now, you'd be born to a relatively poor nation. And all of the grandeur of Greece would be gone. It requires complete adaptability. One cannot be too outwardly excessive and one cannot be too inwardly excessive. And most of all, what this says is that there are always opportunities again and again to spiral upward, to learn from our past mistakes. Like, no one can be a pessimist any more than one can be a sexist or a racist if he wants to know about the truths of rebirth, because everybody eventually improves. Okay. That's all. I don't know what the next talk will be about. Maybe there will be one other beyond that. Yes?
I'm talking about the polarity that you have to do quite large, whatever, mental, physical.
And fire, water. Emotional is usually water.
Okay.
Plato, for example, did not like demonstrations of emotion. Thought that poets were crazy, but sometimes they had lucky strokes of intuition. And thought that men should be in charge of everything. He thought the mind was the closest thing to God. So much so that when he had to be an emotional, mystical nun, he couldn't come. that
You said most of us are in the 2 to 5 rebirth cycle. How does that fit into the session that you put on?
That means we get 2 of each kind within a sessional period.
4.
Yes. And usually, the key word, if you look at everything like something very oriental, what Madame Blavatsky says is no different than what Max Heindel says. Madame Blavatsky says, there's no end to wonders that one can do by prayer and purity and service. It's not wrong. It's exactly like it's coming from and the service is the big thing. Coming back to the service and help people gather as much as we can. Okay. Next time we'll try to be shorter.